Welcome back to another episode of Book Eaters. On this episode, both myself, Michelle, and
April
and
Iris
are going to be talking today about tales as old as time. Stories that keep getting retold and retold and retold and rewritten and retooled and made more magnificent or sometimes less magnificent as time goes on. We're going to be talking about those and more. But as per usual, and is our way, we're going to start off with our fantastic cocktail. And this evening we have a warm cocktail, which is a new thing for us. And I chose tea. Did you go with tea or did you go with coffee, April?
coffee.
Mm-hmm. So basically it's tea, vodka, maple syrup, and vanilla. And it's delicious. In fact, if you don't want to add the vodka, it's really good with just the tea and the vanilla and the maple syrup.
And Michelle recorded a very entertaining video on how to make this drink.
That's right. It's available on our YouTube channel. If you are interested in viewing that, if you have difficulty, or just curious how one adds vodka to tea, it's right there for you to see. See how I made that rhyme? Wasn't that cool? It's catchy.
I know you went into the Rubios.
Is that what you're talking about, Rubios?
Yeah. I've never known how to pronounce it.
It may be wrong. I don't know.
No, I feel like you sounded very knowledgeable on it.
Well, that's my way. I pretend like I know what I'm talking about when in fact I do not. You should never trust me just because I sound like I know what I'm talking about. In fact, if I sound very much like I know what I'm talking about, that's a good clue not to trust me.
I just want to blindly hand over all of my trust and responsibility to you.
Whether or not Rubios is actually pronounced Rubios or some other way, this is fantastic, and I love this cocktail, and I'm going to be making it all the time. So,
and full disclosure, this is not my first drink.
Mine neither. So let's dive right in, as you would say. Dive right in, and we're going to start talking about what kinds of stories are generally rewritten. So, what kinds of stories do we normally see again and again with the same characters, or at least the character names in books today? April?
We could do this like categories.
Oh, let's do it.
So I feel like when we talk about books that get rewritten and reinterpreted, we're probably all thinking the same thing.
Probably.
So if one of us comes up with a genre that no one else thought of, or a point of fact that no one else thought of, they get a point.
Oh, are you keeping score? Because I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I'll do it. I have a pen right here. Okay, who wants to go first?
I've not caught up with you.
Romance. All right. Romance. Okay, so are we just talking about the general category, like Snow White, Cinderella, like fairy tale romance? Or where are you going with
fairy tale. I have fairy tale.
All right, fairy tale. Also,
Victorian.
What's a Victorian story that gets retold again? Like, what's one of those?
The writer's Jane Austen.
Okay. Okay. Right. Yes. Okay.
I do have classic literature.
Jane Austen. All right. Also, Greek mythology.
I do have mythologies and legends. Mythologies and legends.
Right. The
right.
Bible.
Bible stories. Yes. Yes. They always get rewritten.
I also have folk tales.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like Hans Christian Andersen. He's a little handsy.
I count him as fairy tales. I was thinking more like
the Grimm brothers.
Like the Bear and the Nightingale?
The Bear and the Nightingale.
Okay.
Like the Russian folklore. In America, it would be more like Johnny Appleseed, Paul Bunyan.
Not Bunyan. I was just thinking that, yeah.
I'm trying to think if I have anything else that hasn't been said. Hang on, let me look at my notes. We covered like Alice in Wonderland, right? What about Sherlock Holmes?
I think that under classic literature.
Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie has been also, not only just.
I sort of think of that as also classic literature.
Okay. I mean, that's all I got then. What else you got?
That's all I got.
Iris, you got anything else? All right. Well, I feel like we all think the same.
Right? But what doesn't make good retellings?
What doesn't make good retellings? That's an excellent question. I feel like anything can be retold in a new and unique way.
I thought about that until you came up with this as an idea for an episode. And then I started thinking there are some things that would not be good retold because, like science fiction,
Why not?
No, it
Why not?
has.
Why not?
Oh, yeah.
because it's very hard to reinterpret something that was already complete fabrication.
I can tell you already.
I think all of it
science
was
fiction is mine. Nope. Yeah, Isaac Asimov's interpretation of robots have been. The gentleman who wrote Johnny Mnemonic. Oh, he's the father of cyberspace. Johnny Mnemonic.
his stuff has been rewritten.
Oh, many interpretations of it. Yes, he wrote a whole. He's a father of cyberspace. So all the.
What about like
Johnny.
Groundhog Day? Like that idea, living the same day over and over again. That keeps getting
William
retold.
Gibson. All William Gibson's work.
So yeah, sci-fi gets rewritten. I think that you could rewrite it. I think that any story, given enough time and credence, could be rewritten. Like,
I mean, they're saying Star Wars is like a space western.
like what about also like NPC or like Gildan Morgenstern is dead, like that, like where like the sub characters in a story become the main character, right? Like
Well,
that. There's like
I did-
sci-fi versions of that.
I have a term for that, actually.
Oh, you do? What is the term for that?
It is called minor character elaboration.
Ooh.
Well, I'm just saying that's a theme that gets retold over and over again, much like the Groundhog Day, and I see it a lot in science fiction. Like red shirts, NPCs.
Okay.
I think of it more like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love the whole idea of a minor character.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole thing for me. I feel like most of my favorite books that have been reinterpreted,
Mm-hmm.
more than like just straight up reiterations of it, is when the story is told from a different character's point of view. And when I started thinking about it, there are a lot of examples of books that I've loved, but wasn't thinking of them in the context of being a reinterpretation. But I loved that idea, you know?
So like Wicked in terms of.
Yeah, Wicked is a great example, right? Of we took a small, but I think but I'm just saying, like in sci-fi, I've seen that a lot. That sort of theme being retold.
Of a minor character telling the same story from a different point of view.
Or just like the idea of like a story that we are all familiar with, like Star Trek and Red Shirts, right? Where Red Shirts is basically taking the story of Star Trek type of thing and making it about these small characters. Or NPC, where it's talking about like D&D, like the game is whatever, and then the characters and that. Well, that's kind of fantasy. It's more than sci-fi.
The greatest example of what you're talking about would be the Odyssey and the Iliad.
What do you mean that he was the main character, Odysseus?
No, the Odyssey, the story, the Odyssey and the Iliad, were from characters' perspectives of the gods, their story, who they were. The stories was through their perspective. They told the NPCs were telling.
Oh, you're right. So like the stories are about Zeus and whatever, Circe, whoever, but then they were told from the people.
Right.
That's interesting.
The Red Tent by
I've
Anita.
heard of this book. This is about Ruth, right?
No, it actually Dinah is the character, and I believe, and I haven't read the book in a long time, so I hope I'm right. But I think
it's Dinah.
She was the daughter of Leah and Joseph.
Okay.
And in the Bible, it's just like a tiny little snippet.
She's a female character in the Bible, so there you go.
Yeah, she's not important at all. She did not give birth to the Savior or cut someone's head off, so she's irrelevant. But it tells her story, and in doing so, it tells the story of Jewish women in that period. And it was written by Anita Diamant, I believe.
I heard of this book. I remember people reading it when I was in college.
Well, I mean, it was so good. It's just her whole story, and it's so well written. If you don't know by now, let me announce it. I am a lover of historical fiction. I love Tracy Chevalier, everything she's ever done.
Lady and the Unicorn.
That is right. And so this is sort of that sort of thing where there's just like a seed of a kernel of history. And what Anita Diamant has done, as she has taken that little tiny kernel of history, and she has sowed it. She has tended it and watered it and fertilized it and done what was needed to have it blossom into a fully told story. And is that not what we try to do on this podcast? I feel like
Yeah, okay.
everyone should read that. It's
I've
great.
heard great things about the Red Tent. I've never read it myself, but I have heard great things about the Red Tent.
Well, I would loan it to you, but you don't read shit that I loan to you.
I'm going to read The Lady and the Unicorn. It's going to happen. It's not my fault that there's a pandemic and I'm not spending any time in my car. It's not my fault.
That's right, because that is your place.
That's where I listen to CDs. I don't have a CD player. It's only in my car. Okay. So the other thing that I want to talk about, and this one is harder because I couldn't find any examples myself, so I'm super hoping that you guys did, is rewrites Undercover, which is where the basic plot is there, but it's sort of masked. It's masked in such a way where it doesn't specifically say that we're talking about this story. So in the story, we're retelling the story of Snow White, but we're not calling the character Snow White, and it didn't take place. Or like Cinderella, right?
Right.
That's a good example. Cinder. It doesn't specifically, the characters' names and whatever aren't necessarily the same as Cinderella, but like you know that it's Cinderella as a story. Can you think of any examples of that? I can think of it in like television, like.
But you're saying in book.
Well, I mean, so TV is remade books. So for example, like The Taming of the Shrew, 10 Things I Hate About You, or Clueless is one of the Jane Austen books right there. So it's like an undercover version of that story. Like if you know that story, you're like, all right, this is the story. But if you don't know that story, it just looks like a teenage story taking place in a high school, right?
Well, I feel like that can happen a lot. I think the question is it intentional or is it, derivative? Because if the writer's intent is to acknowledge and appreciate the original and we're just modernizing it versus not acknowledging it, that's two different things.
Well, I think in both the cases that I mentioned, the intent was to modernize those plays.
Well, I feel like there could be an entire conversation about intentional retellings of Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, absolutely. I almost even sort of feel like Little Women was a little bit of a nod.
True. She's right. Little Women had been retold.
But that's sort of like an undercover version of it.
Right.
Because it doesn't specifically say this is a retelling of that story.
Right. And it absolutely is its own story. But there's a little bit of a nod, a little bit of a head tilt to, multiple sisters, each having a different personality, and Meg being the responsible sister and the one that everybody loves, and then Jo being sort of the madcap black sheep who does her own thing, and then the silly sister, that does impetuous things that sort of reflects badly on the rest of the family. And then you also had Amy, who was just sort of a throwaway character, which is not to say anything negative about either Amy or what was the Jane Austen sister, that Mary, right? Not to say anything negative about Mary or Amy, because those are the characters I most identified with. I'm sort of a throwaway character.
But I wonder if it's not necessarily not a nod to Jane Austen, but to the actual world that existed back then. Like, was that sort of thing popular?
Well, I mean, they were separated by 150 years. So,
but I'm just saying, that time period, though, women have always been told they have to find a man.
Yeah, but
that has always been the thing. So and larger families were more common in previous generations.
Right.
But all sisters are right. There's sort of a theme.
Yeah, and every sister has to be different. You can't just have two sisters that are kind of the same, Well,
that would be sort of boring.
Even taking Little Women out of it, right? I've read several retellings of Pride and Prejudice. There is the zombie one, but two interesting ones that I read probably in the last, I don't know, maybe 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was called Pride, and it told the story from the perspective of a Haitian Dominican family in Brooklyn. And what was really interesting, so it's like a modern day telling, right? It takes place, like in modern times. And how do you, especially in the US, how do you talk about class differences when the US is supposed to be this great melting pot? And the way that they addressed it was gentrification. So they're in Brooklyn, and now they're fixing up the neighborhood. And so these, rich people are coming in to the neighborhood, and now they're this sort of dynamic that I thought it was pretty well told.
Was a retelling of what, though?
It was Pride and Prejudice.
So do you think like Bridget Jones' Diary?
That is that's supposed to be one. I remember reading that book however many years ago, probably, was it 20 years ago? It seems like a really long time.
Don't say it was 20 years ago.
I feel like it was a really long time ago.
It was a long time ago because
And I can remember, because I have my thing where I want to read the book before I see the movie, and I hadn't heard of the book before the movie. I think the way I found out about it was like this controversy because Renee Zellweger was cast and she's not even British.
Mm-hmm.
But it was supposed to be this great book based on Pride and Prejudice. But really the only similarity was the fact that she had a thing for a guy named Darcy, and then there was another guy that she initially liked more that turned out to be a dick.
Well, also she was kind of like Elizabeth in that she was constantly making blunders that were making her look silly. Like, I think that there's her personality, although it was way exaggerated, but it was kind of like how we sort of saw Elizabeth as sort of this unfortunate things happening to her, right? Like, I have this vision of her like traipsing through the woods and getting all dirty and showing up. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like
she had foibles.
Like these little foibles, which made the Darcy character, sort of like, and the other character was sort of endearing. Like I think that there was a little bit of that, and then the mix up between the two. Like she thought the one guy was one way, and then the other. So I mean, I feel like that book though was kind of I think that's a good example of the Undercover rewrite because they don't really. It alludes to it, but it's not when you're watching the story, reading the story, you're not thinking immediately about Pride and Prejudice necessarily.
We forgot to mention one good classic besides Pride and Prejudice.
Which one?
When it comes to romance, by William Shakespeare.
Taming of the Shrew?
Romeo and Juliet.
Well,
but the Taming of the Shrew too, but I think of that as a movie. I think of that as like Heath Ledger and...
There's also the musical, Kiss Me, Kate.
Right.
Also that, yes. But I couldn't think of that many books I
can't think of that many books that are Romeo and Juliet either. I think immediately of that Claire Danes.
No, there's quite a few books that have taken the interpretation of Romeo and Juliet.
Do you think that...
Fiction. I've even science fiction, they've done it.
Well, I mean, the Warring Houses, I guess that's a pretty common sort of thing. That's true. Mm-hmm. I think Shakespeare a lot gets things retold because he has a lot of fun themes.
Well, when I was thinking about this episode and I was trying to, do my research so I would sound smart, I found out a term.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's called pastiche.
Pastiche.
Okay. Yeah, and that's where a book is written. I mean, not just for books, it applies to like art and stuff too, but it's when something is done in the style of something else. And I think I quite enjoy that. So like what we were saying about Sherlock, the Lady Sherlock is a perfect example of that. I
love the Sherry Thomas books. Yeah.
So good. I also read a book several years ago called The Luminaries. And when I even reading it, I felt like I was reading a book from 200 years ago because there was just the language. I don't know how it's a mystery to me still. I would like to ask the author, whose name is Eleanor Catton or Catton, I'm not sure. Her language was like she was old, but she's not. This was just written a few years ago. And the other thing that she did, which I thought was, do y'all remember in a previous episode I talked about little big books? Yes. And how when I was little I had this collection of books, and I don't know, there was like 26 books or something, and they were all of the classics. I can't remember what the book was, but at the beginning of each chapter, there would be just like a little hint of what was going to come after, like in the chapter. And this book does that. She's like, this chapter is called Son of Capricorn. And then right before you get into the chapter, she has like little segue.
Yeah.
And it's like, in which Gascoigne recalls his first encounter with the whore. Several seams are unpicked with a knife. Exhaustion takes its toll, and Anna Weatherall makes a request. So you're already intrigued. I don't know how do you go to bed after reading something like that. You can't just be like, oh, I'll put a bookmark in it and I'll read it tomorrow after work. I need to know what Anna Weatherall's request was. I need to know why they unpicked the seams. I need to know what the first encounter with the whore was like. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
This book is genius. And it's an example, in my opinion, of pastiche. That's all I'm saying.
Nicely entered, pastiche.
So what would you call, like the story of King Arthur, which was, I've read the two books, La Mort d'Arthur and the Once in a Future King.
Okay.
Then you have the Myths of Avalon.
Right, which we talked about before on this podcast.
Yeah, I think of that more, that's Marion Zimmer.
Yeah, Marion Zimmer.
Bradley. But I think what I think about that more is the story told from the different point of view.
Right.
It's the same story, just told from a different character's point of view.
Yes, Marion Zimmer Bradley.
But that's another example, right? King Arthur would fall under what?
Legend.
In
my opinion.
Is that how you pronounce that word? Opinion?
Yes, that's the official way. Yes.
All right. Well, I mean, that is your opinion.
But you want to talk about Undercover?
Yeah.
So I brought up Little Women as an undercover retelling of, or at least deeply inspired by Jane Austen. Here's another one. I sort of feel like the line C.S. Lewis, Narnia. There's some definite.
That's the Bible.
There's also some definite fairy tale, the Snow Queen.
The Snow Queen.
Right.
Yeah,
also,
it's supposed to be the Bible, I think.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be. Yeah, from what I understood to be too.
Well, he was super religious. Had some.
Supposed to be, because I think whatever the lion's name is supposed to be Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm. This is what happens at the table. Yeah.
Yeah.
He sacrificed himself. Yeah.
I mean, I've never read nor seen the play or the movie, which is a horror for Rob, who loves it.
I'll be honest. I started the books and couldn't finish them because I did not enjoy them.
Oh.
Yeah, I did not. But the other thing is, like Philip Pullman, all of the, the Compass, the Dark Material series. Yeah, I feel like that was super, and I think that was, a little bit of the Snow Queen.
Frozen is Snow Queen.
Is that a book?
No, it's a movie. It's a story, and I'm sticking to it.
But was there an evil Snow Queen?
It was just a twisting of the story. Disney doesn't make the exact story; they always Disney it up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in this case, they made the Snow Queen. Good.
It says it's loosely based on Andersen's fairy tale of the Snow Queen.
So it says it. See, it says it.
That's what the Google tells us.
Yeah, that's I'm supposed to be your Google backup here. Okay.
That's what the Google backup says.
Yep.
I've moved on to my giant mug. Did you see this mug? It says, "Sit, stay, drink, fetch another. Do your best to hold your liquor. Drink like a dog."
Lap it up, girl. Lap it up.
This is a mug a friend of mine named Monica gave to me. I'm sure you're all surprised.
I feel like it may have inspired your drink tonight.
No.
How did you come up with the drink for tonight?
Because I love hot tea the most. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about what kind of thing would be remade over and over and over again. And coffee drinks or hot drinks are ones that are like, people always put liquor in their coffee or their tea.
And it is starting to get a little chilly.
And it's cold. And And it's tea or coffee, I guess. All right. So what are your favorite rewrites or themes? Does anybody have any favorites?
Well, like I said, I really love the rewrites from another character's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that have really stuck with me. Speaking of Little Women, there was, have y'all ever read Jo Baker?
No.
So she did one where she's actually written a lot that I like, but she did a book where the story was told from the point of view of a servant in the house of Pride and Prejudice at Longbourn.
Oh.
And did y'all ever watch, well, I feel like everybody watched Downton Abbey.
I did not.
You did not? Oh, well, you should.
The original PBS, I did. I've not done revisited the new one.
I haven't watched any of them.
Well, that really got me interested in what in the land of Ing, also known as England, they
oh no, that was a stretch. That was quite the stress.
So it's like where you're in service, right? And there's upstairs and downstairs characters, right? Upstairs are the families of privilege and of good breeding, and then below stairs is the servants. And so Longbourn, that's the name of the book by Jo Baker, tells the same story. It takes place. So in Downton Abbey, the beauty of that is that two narratives are happening at the same time. You're seeing, what's going on in the lives of the people above stairs, but there's a separate story also being told of the servants and what's happening below stairs.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, too often the story is just told from the perspective of the people above stairs. So that was the beautiful thing about Downton Abbey, and the beautiful thing about Longbourn is it's telling the story of Pride and Prejudice, but from the perspective of the maid. And so it was pretty interesting, pretty cool. I felt like some of it could have been done better. I mean, it did get a little too soap opera-y for me and for my tastes, but it was still
Can I ask a question? The Longbourn, whose household was the servants based on?
It was at what was the last name of?
Oh, the Bennets.
The Bennets.
Okay. It was the Bennets. Okay, I wasn't quite sure whether.
Did the Bennets have people?
They did. They had a reduced household, as one might say, but they did have servants, but anyway, so it was pretty interesting, and I really enjoyed that. Similarly, there was another one. I love Jane Austen, and I'm not going to make apologies for it.
You should not.
And it was Death Comes to Pemberley.
Oh.
But it wasn't exactly a retelling, but it was what happened after Elizabeth and Darcy married, and Lydia ran off with
Mr. Wickham.
And so Lydia, had to be forced, because of Darcy. Well, everybody knows the story, but in any case, so they still have not got their shit together. Old Wickham and Lydia, they're still total fuck ups, and they bring their drama to Pemberley. Okay,
that checks out.
And now Darcy and his wife have to help deal with it. So there's a death on the way to Pemberley, and of course at the beginning everyone suspects Wickham, and I don't want to give it away in case anybody reads it, but you get to see a little glimpse of what Elizabeth and Darcy's marriage became after, say probably 5 or 8 years.
So it was like almost like fan fiction, maybe like a little bit like how they imagined it to happen after.
Yeah, but it wasn't so much focused on the main characters. It was a whole nother story. It was just sort of the background of it.
That's cool.
But I don't know a lot about fan fiction, so maybe that is what it was.
I mean, I have nothing against fan fiction myself. I know a lot of people love it. I haven't partaken very much. I didn't even read Twilight, but I have heard many people love it.
I mean, look at Star Wars. I mean, it started as a movie, but then there's books, and a lot of the books were written by fans. And so it built this whole universe.
I think Aliens has a lot of books too. I don't know if those are fan fiction books or if they're just books in that universe. But those are good. Recommend. All right. So if you had to say one, maybe two books that you have read that you would recommend, what would they be, Iris? Of this venue, like retelling. I know you mentioned a bunch of sci-fi ones earlier.
Yeah, so if you liked William Gibson, I would recommend Neil Stephenson.
The book's name is Neil Stephenson.
Oh,
it's
no,
written by William Gibson?
No, so William Gibson has written the whole series of books on cyberspace and the human mind. Yeah, you know the concept of singularity?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't want to get into science, but the books go into how man and machine become one. And so,
yeah, become a singular entity, man and machine.
So then, so Neil Stephenson has like Snow Crash, another set of books that go into that kind of concept too. So that's my recommend. Really good book. Count Zero.
Johnny Mnemonic was the original book, and that was written by who?
William Gibson.
And then who rewrote that story?
Not rewrote the same story, but the concept of that world.
Who wrote it? Who rewrote it?
Neil Stephenson. In Snow Crash, and then you have
Crash.
And then you have, but his interpretation is more of what in the more realistic world. Is it different? It's more.
So the book that we're recommending is called Snow Crash.
Yes,
and it is by Neil
Stephenson. And then Ready Player One.
And Ready Player One is a great book. I love Ready Player One.
Yes.
All right.
That was actually Ready Player One was an example of something that I was going to suggest when I had a question for you, ladies, which is what more recent books do we think would make a great future retelling? And Ready Player One was one of mine. I felt like that could definitely be.
So I feel like, I don't know, did you guys read Locked In?
No.
With John Scalzi?
No.
So I sense a lot of the themes in Locked In from Ready Player One but it's a little bit different. It's more like that other movie where they were living in robot bodies. But basically in Locked In, there's like a virus that comes and it wipes everybody, it breaks, and then people are locked in their bodies, right? So they can't like react physically to things. They can't talk or walk or pee or eat or any of those joyous things. So what happens then is instead they create robots. And then they can sort of like link their minds. They can link their minds to the robots, and then the robots become who they are, and then the robots sort of interact in their place. And then in the book, in addition to this robot, there was also like this space. There was like this space that they could go to like hang out with each other, where people who didn't have robot bodies couldn't go. So like these people that were locked in had this other full, rich life, and some of them never left it. In this like sort of virtual space.
Okay,
and
now
that reminds me a lot of Ready Player One because not only did they have this virtual space where they all hung out, but they also interacted completely outside of their bodies in sort of a virtual way.
So what you're saying is, I was thinking Ready Player One was a super original concept and would inspire rewrites, and you're saying nope, even Ready Player One was derivative.
Yeah. All right, so my books that I think that I would recommend. First of all, I want to say Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman.
Anansi, yeah.
Which is a great retelling of, is it the spider?
Yes. The spider, yeah.
Which is a fantastic book. I do not recommend Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. That was boring and dry.
I loved it. I've read it and I loved it. Sorry.
I do recommend Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman. And then right on the heels of that, I think The Hollow of Fear, A Study in Scarlet Women by Sherry Thomas. Those are the two that I'd recommend. The Sherry Thomas, Study in Scarlet Women, and then Anansi Boys. Those are the two that I'd recommend. And then also the Iron Druid Chronicles. So I'm feeling very Greek mythology, because the Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearn, which incidentally is wonderfully narrated. It's a great audio book. And I know we were talking about this earlier, April, off the podcast. It takes place in Tempe, which is where I'm from, Arizona, and it reminds me of that. But in addition to that, it's a great with Thor and, those gods, Loki, all that nonsense.
Norse mythology.
Norse mythology. All of that's happening like sort of in sort of a today's sort of spectrum, and it's really great. So those are the ones that I'd recommend.
Well, so if we're talking about ones already written that I would recommend, I think Myths of Avalon, absolutely.
Right, you love that one.
I love those so much. I would also probably say there's a book called, well, I hate to bring up The Little Women again, but there was a retelling of Little Women from the perspective of the dad, and it was called March by Geraldine Brooks, and I felt like that was pretty good. And then if we're going to talk about books that we've read recently that we feel like would inspire a lot of rewrites, and like I said, Ready Player One was one of mine, but apparently that one's already derivative. I would say The Outsiders.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a wonderful book. Yes.
That could really be updated and retold, I feel.
Oh, yeah.
Stay gold, man. Stay gold.
I would also say A Man Called Ove.
I don't know what that is.
It was like, I feel like maybe it was Norwegian or Danish or something up in there with where the Vikings came from. But it was a book that was translated into English probably like 2 years ago, and it's so great. It's so great, but it basically tells the story of a man who he's a cranky pants. He's super grumpy.
Grumpy Gus.
He doesn't like people. There's only one person in his life that he likes, and that is his wife that he met when they were young, and they fell in love, and she brings out the best in him, and they have a wonderful life together in which they live in a small neighborhood, and he's competitive with his neighbor who likes one sort of car, but he only believes in Volvos, and he trades in his Volvo every so many years, and that is what his life is with his wife, and they can't have children, and that's cool because all he cares about is his wife. And then his wife dies.
Oh, how very up of it.
Yep. And so his wife dies and he's alone, and now he does not give a fuck about a goddamn thing. He's done with it. Doesn't care about the Volvo. Everything's going to hell in a handbasket. He's done with life and he's just ready to phone it in. So he starts planning a suicide.
Jesus.
But you know what keeps interrupting him?
The guy next door?
The budding of life all around him.
Okay. It's almost like, I love the movie, and it's one of my favorite DreamWorks that this reminds me. I wonder if it was based on this. They based it's Up.
Up, yeah, that's what I was saying Up earlier, because of the wife dying and the whole life together.
Yeah,
and then
I wonder if it was based on this
Gus.
book. It could have been based on the book she's talking about.
And then the dog comes and he sees the squirrel.
I feel like if anything, that maybe the movie was based on that book.
That's what she's saying.
That's what I said.
Based on the book, not the other way.
The movie, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
So,
I guess if you're going to infantilize it and make it into very palatable bites of
Jesus, April.
Well, I mean,
casting some shade.
The book was way more. I mean, he has the noose around his neck. He's got.
Oh, it's darker, of course. It's adult. It's not a kid's. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's getting weird now. April's getting grumpy. She doesn't like us Pixaring up her book. It's fine. I think that they should retell it non-Disney-fied.
Pixar. Is it a Pixar?
It is a Pixar. I think DreamWorks, whatever.
DreamWorks. Okay.
But it's still,
Yeah, a kid's
cartoons.
movie. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about books that we have read in this genre that we don't like. Because I have one. My pet peeve, Goddess of the Sea by P.C. Cass. Y'all know how I feel about this book, right? The narrator is terrible. The whole thing is terrible. It's terrible, terrible, terrible. Do not read this book. Do not put yourself through it. Not even if the book club wants you to. You just tell them, no, I'm not reading that book because it is terrible. It's supposed to be like, I think, a Little Mermaid-ish. It's like a little bit of a twist of the Little Mermaid. Like she falls into the sea from an airplane or a helicopter crash or some shit.
You know what?
And then she becomes a mermaid. But then she goes on the land and she becomes a person. And then she has to fall in love to become a mermaid again. It's really fucking... And then she falls in love with this merman.
That is like the Little Mermaid.
She falls in love with this fucking merman in like 10 seconds, which makes no sense whatsoever, much like the Little Mermaid. And then she's just... it's terrible. It's a terrible book. It's a terrible audiobook.
Is it as depressing as the original?
No, it's not depressing. It's just terrible. It's trite. I just hated it. Maybe I'm drunk and I shouldn't be talking nonsense about books.
I love it.
Like,
no,
but
I love it when you're like, I hate it. Book.
Goddess of the Sea with PC Cast. I hated it.
You were allowed to hate some things.
I don't like it at all.
Can you say the name of the book one more time?
Goddess of the Sea by PC Cast. I think I've talked shit about it before.
Well, I will say, and I'm just going to say it. I don't even care who this alienates me from.
Oh.
I read Wicked. I hated it.
Ooh,
I have not seen the musical, but I was super excited. It was on all the lists. You may even say it was a literary darling when it was.
I'm gonna say this, April, but by saying that, it's not how you become popular. It's a song from the musical Wicked. It's fine that you didn't get it. But I've seen the musical Wicked. Only I haven't read the book, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the musical a great deal.
Well, I read the book. I've not seen the musical. I read the book because it was, and I would just want to say it again because it's like one of my favorite terms, a literary darling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I can't wait to dive into this. But I hated it so much.
Why? Why did you hate it?
There was I loved the concept of, someone who had always been portrayed as like the wicked witch, and she has a backstory, that she is the product of her environment.
She has an arc. Yeah.
What the world made her.
Right.
I loved that. I loved it. Except that even from the beginning, I didn't like her. I didn't even like Glinda. I didn't like either one of them. I liked no one. I was rooting for no one.
Oh, I hate that.
It was just a tedious slog of words.
We are so rough tonight. What about you, Iris? You got anybody you want to be mad at?
No.
She's like, no, I'm out. I'm not drunk enough to talk shit about people I don't know. All right, that's cool. Are we ready? Are we ready for the bookend, or do we have more things that you guys want to chat about? We're ready for the bookend. All right, so in the bookend, what's going to happen is I'm going to badly and briefly describe a story, and you're going to tell me what story is that story. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is everybody ready? Mm-hmm. I'm not keeping score because I'm too drunk to write down things. So if you want to keep score, feel free. I'm just going to say it. We're going to say it out loud. We're going to assume that we're all winners here, okay? All right. All right, here we go. You ready? And the first one is this. Just yell it out when you get it. Or, yeah.
I feel like from a lot of shows that I watched, your name is your buzzer.
I mean, that sounds complicated. Maybe just raise your hand. Just raise your hand, and whoever raises their hand first, I will see, and I'll call on you when I've read it. It's really fast.
Okay, but for the people who grew up in this area, your name is your buzzer is a reference to the morning show with Steve. It was a radio show back in the 90s.
Is this super important to you that you say your name?
Well, no, that was on the, on the morning show. I'd listen to it in my car when I was driving to work. It was like back when radio was real, People would listen to radio on their way to work, and you would have like the morning show. Every city, I'm sure, had a morning radio show, sort of the Newhart show, right? You had the Newharts, right? That was the thing.
That was a television show.
Yeah, but I'm saying that everyone had a show.
Yeah, morning DJs are a bit. They're a bit.
Right.
I hate
And so,
them. I hate them because they talk to people more than they play music. And I really just want to hear music. I don't want to listen to people talk. I hate the general public. I don't know what's wrong with me with that, but like I cannot handle it. Like
that is so surprising.
on the news radio when they call the people call in because I'm so embarrassed for them every time. I'm so embarrassed for them.
Oh, that checks out.
Please stop talking because they say stupid things like, well, my girlfriend had chlamydia and we were talking about what the blah, blah, blah. And then the morning show just exploits that fucking shit. He just exploits it. He doesn't care. He doesn't care.
Wait.
And it's hard for me because I'm like, you asshole, why are you putting this guy on the radio? He doesn't need this. He doesn't want that on the radio.
Do they exploit it or do they celebrate it?
They fucking exploit it. They don't celebrate shit. The slut shamers. You know they are. Those morning.
Well, I feel like that's the difference between Arizona and Georgia in the 90s. Because
in the 90s? Nobody celebrated shit in the 90s. Everybody.
Let me tell you.
I don't care.
So back in the 90s, and when we're talking about our morning show, they had this, and this is very problematic nowadays. I totally get it. But they had this bit where they had this woman called Boobs McGillicuddy.
This is exactly what I'm talking about.
And
this is 100% what I'm talking about.
Boobs McGillicuddy was and you had to envision it because it wasn't like we have it now where things are recorded and audio.
Right, it's the radio.
Boobs McGillicuddy her whole bit was that she would go into public places and try to get things for free because of her boobies. But it sounds demeaning. But what they were really making fun of was the people who were susceptible to it.
So they still do this shit. Like a year ago. No, listen. A year ago, I was listening to the radio in the morning show, and they had this guy who would, like, you could go to McDonald's and get a free cup of coffee on Thursdays for some fucking stupid reason, and he would go in and get his free cup of coffee. Then he would change his clothes and put on a disguise, and then go in and get another cup of coffee, and then keep fucking doing that shit until they were like, "Look, asshole, I've already given you 6 cups of coffee." Like that was the bit on the morning show. They still do this nonsense, and I think it's annoying. Although I do love costumes. It's fine. All right.
So what you're saying is that dude getting the free cup of coffee at McDonald's was a retelling of Boobs McGillicuddy.
That is 100% what I am saying. I'm glad that you drew that connection and brought the episode together. All right. Just raise your hand.
Okay, let's
Ready.
do the book in.
Here we go.
Okay.
In the tumultuous era just before the rise of the French Revolution, a proletariat woman becomes a servant to a disgraced prince to save another. Proletariat woman? In the tumultuous era just before the rise of the French Revolution, a proletariat woman becomes a servant to a disgraced prince to save another.
Napoleon.
Wait. You know what it is?
No, I'd like to give it a try, though.
Who do you think it is?
It's the one with the story. I forgot the name of the story. It's a very famous story where you have the 2 princes. One.
Nope. No.
All right. I'm going to guess 1001 Arabian Nights.
No. I'm going to tell you now that the person that she's trying to save is her father. In some versions. The prince is actually very, very ugly.
Beauty and the Beast.
Yes, Beauty and the Beast. All right.
Oh.
Next, ready?
Okay.
A girl with a loose grip on reality faces down an evil queen.
Snow White.
No.
An evil queen. A girl, what?
With a loose grip on reality faces down an
Alice
evil
in
queen.
Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland. Ding, 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 ding. All right. A woman sells part of herself in order to meet a man.
Little Mermaid.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. The way you described it. That's also.
A girl grounded in her room escapes through the window to meet the man of her dreams.
Oh, that's the one with the long hair.
Which is?
Rapunzel.
Rapunzel, okay.
Rapunzel.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding. 2 kids abandoned in the woods murder
Hansel
a woman.
and Gretel.
Yes, murder a woman in her home. A woman who just wants to be left alone turns men into pigs. Come on, Iris.
That's Jessica Mueller. I met her in 3rd grade.
Turns them into pigs.
She's actually a goddess. She also encountered Odysseus at some point. She's part of that legend.
Oh, this is all Iris.
Okay, wait.
I'm out.
It's so many old stories.
There was a whole book
She's
written
a
about
witch.
her, and it was written by Madeline.
And once you tell me, I probably would tell me.
Madeline Miller?
No, she doesn't sound familiar.
Circe!
I know. I said it was like okay. It was a.
She's a goddess. All right. Two roommates solve crimes.
Cagney and Lacey.
Well, true. Not what I'm looking for.
Okay, male, female.
Males.
Males. Okay.
Sherlock and
Ding, ding, ding,
Watson.
ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
but
Sherlock
also
Holmes.
but also Cagney and Lacey.
But also Cagney and Lacey. All right. This is the last one. Alien uses tool as a weapon.
E.T.
No.
Terminator.
No.
Wally.
Wanna guess, Iris?
Okay. Alien
Uses tool as weapon. No? All right. The tool is a hammer.
I'm thinking Mythos. Sorry, Thor, but that's okay.
Yes, Thor. That's the answer. Ding, ding, ding.
Okay.
He's from a different planet. He's an alien. What the hell? All right. That's what I got
You're so cute.
for the bookend. Good job, you guys. All right. So that's all I got for you guys today. So we can go ahead and wrap this podcast up.
You went like total what?
No.
899.
What's 899?
Sexy caller.
Thank you for calling and listening to the Book Eaters podcast, Tale as Old as Time. And I appreciate your taking the time to listen to us this evening. If you liked anything you heard, please go ahead and like us on Facebook and Instagram and check out our videos on YouTube.
Like us real hard.
Be sure you like us real, real hard. And we just want to remind you at this time, you want to go ahead and eat the books, motherfucker.
It's very hard for me to say that. You can cut this piece out. Because my mom is right there next to me right now.
Oh my God, your mom is still there?
Yeah.
All right. You want to do a different close just in case that one doesn't work out when we're sober?
No, that's perfect. Sorry, that was too good.
Thank you all for joining A Tale as Old as Time. We hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you will turn in next time when we discuss more interesting topics. And until then, we'd like to encourage you all to
eat the
books.
Motherfucker.
Nice. Epilogue. It was well after she had taken her editing pass at the episode when it suddenly occurred to Michele that she did not in fact know how to pronounce Rubius. Laying in bed, listening to a sci-fi book about a space crew going mutinous, she could no longer focus on the danger that faced the crew, and so she paused her book and Googled it. Sure enough, she was pronouncing it incorrectly. It is pronounced Roibos. Michele admonished herself for her Eurocentric or American-centric understanding of language. Rooibos is only grown in Cedarburg, South Africa, and is made from rooibos plants. It literally translates to red bush. In Afrikaans, a single O is pronounced the same as a double O, and that is why ROOI is pronounced Roy instead of Rue-E. With new understanding, Michele sipped her tea and returned to her book.